when you're inside a company, it is actually less about the process, although important, and it's much more important about people and how to build trust and how to bring people along, how to help people believe in a vision and a mission, have them see themselves in that, and building support so that you could be successful from the inside.
Hi, I'm Tracy Lovejoy.
And I'm Shannon Lucas. We are the co-CEOs of Catalyst Constellations, which is dedicated to empowering Catalyst to create bold, powerful change in the world.
This is our podcast, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burnout, where we speak with Catalyst executives about ways to successfully lead transformation in large organizations. Today, we are incredibly excited to have time with Maria Giudice. Maria is the author of one of my new favorite books, Changemakers: How Leaders Can Design Change in an Insanely Complex World, as well as Rise of the DEO, Leadership by Design. Today, Maria is coaching and leading workshops to train executives and their teams in business and design leadership. Before that, she was the founder and CEO of the experience design firm Hot Studio, which was acquired by Facebook in 2013. So there at Facebook and at Autodesk, she led global design teams that created human-centered experiences for millions of people around the world. She is also a professor, a board member, an artist, a parent. We're getting to learn so many beautiful things about her. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Maria.
Wow, I feel like there's a lot of power in the room right now. So I'm feeling it, and I'm excited to talk to both of you.
Well, thank you for naming that, because I'm definitely experiencing that as well.
Yeah, I'm feeling it.
We'd love to hear, how do you relate to the concept of Catalyst?
Well, I think you can go by many names. I just want to put it out there that Catalyst name is, you can call it a catalyst, you can call it a change maker. It's these special people that have a purpose in life to make the world better, and do everything in their possible, doing everything in that is possible to lead change. And I want to say for the better. These are people who really care about, I feel like catalysts are like optimistic, hopeful people who really believe that progress moves the needle forward, and they carry sort of an energy and a strength to work through adversity to try to get to the other side.
I truly have goosebumps. There's so much about what you just said, and it reminds me of something that actually really struck me in the book. In the book, at first, I kind of had to reread. You have a line that says something like, a change maker that is mostly purpose becomes too disruptive in the world. And so I heard you lead with purpose, and I was like, where will she go? And so I love that it's the optimism, it's the resilience, it's the engaging with what is and the progress. So I love that as you did it, you fleshed out those other attributes that you brought forward are essential. We definitely experience this in working with executives, that there's a set of skills that really have to be developed and refined.
Yes.
To hit those levels, to truly be able to integrate within organizational settings.
Yeah, it's a combination of building skills and experience, but it is also these intrinsic values that are connected to purpose, passion, and performance. And so there's definitely things can be developed over time, but courage and, like you said, resilience, it's kind of part of these people's DNA, and how they can use them for good, right? Because 100%. There's a lot of adversity with change,
which leads into our next question, because that is the catalyst change maker experience. And so having purpose is definitely, we can also, I am curious, but I don't want to take it down too far. The purpose can be a double-edged sword sometimes, because sometimes too much resiliency and too much stuff. But, right. in your stint in the corporate world, I'm wondering, because that has its own sort of flavor of challenges. What were some of the challenges that you encountered in the corporate world, and how did you overcome those as a catalyst leader?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Shannon. Now I think of like the younger me. The younger me was this tomboy growing up in Staten Island who had a chip on her shoulder, who would constantly fight with boys and try to achieve equality. Like, I'm as good as you, I'm gonna, work twice as hard to be better than you. Like, there was this sort of like competitive spirit, but it was always driven by this need to feel equality and fairness through my gender, right? And then I went and I worked in, I built a company, Hot Studio, again, female entrepreneur in a world of tech. Again, always feeling like I have to fight, I have to be resilient, I have to prove that I'm equal to you, right? And, but I was also my own also my own boss. So my mistakes, I could own my own mistakes and fall on my own sword. And so I had this cavalier attitude, like I had the passion, purpose, I had the skills, I was very confident, and I had gone through a lot of adversity. And then my company got acquired by Facebook. And even though I've worked with clients in corporate America for 15, 20 years, I had never, ever worked inside corporate America.
Yeah.
And that was like my first sort of like, I'm going to say aha moment, not mistake. But I went into corporate America thinking that I had this down, that I understood culture, that I knew how to work inside a company. And then I realized it was like a completely different set of skills when you're inside a company, working inside the belly of beast versus working externally as working in an agency. And we had talked about this earlier. A lot of people make the mistake that if you feel like you have the process down, that you're going to be successful. But when you're inside a company, it is actually less about the process, although important, and it's much more important about people and how to build trust and how to bring people along, how to help people believe in a vision and a mission, have them see themselves in that, and building support so that you could be successful from the inside. And this was a huge wake-up call when I got to Facebook and realized that even though I had already lived a long life and had 20 plus years under my belt as a leader, I was like a novice all over again being inside a company.
It's such a great reflection that you had that depth of experience from a different modality that you can go in with. I mean, I'm kind of probably, it sounds like a forced clarity as you're getting there. Like, can you explain a challenge or a time that, you were confronted by the difference, and how did you overcome it? Yes, the bringing people along and the trust, and it's like, we're like, yeah, that sounds great. But like materially, you have to deliver, quarterly things, and you have things on you. Like, how did you leverage or develop those skills?
Well, the thing that I soon learned being inside corporate America is that you could have all the data, you could have all the research. Remember, my background's in design. So my first process is research-informed insights, right? And so you think you have all the logic, you have all the proof points, you have, you've done all the communication, you've done all of those things, you have the metrics, you have success metrics, you have all the receipts.
Yeah.
And so the big obstacle for me was and that's important, but it's not necessarily going to get people to believe in your mission or build trust. And then you're going to have this regardless of all the proof points, you are going to confront people who are going to block your initiative, whether or not you have proof, right? Because when you're working with change, it triggers emotional responses in people. And there are, and this has been a huge learning through my research being from corporate America in the end was, how do you build your own self-awareness in terms of how you show up as a leader? If you show up with all the receipts and you're defensive, you're not going to get people to buy in. So a lot of the work that I learned through, trial and error and lots of pain is that there are going to be people who are not going to be comfortable with change you seek. And they're either going to be it's going to be implicit or it's going to be explicit. And it's those silent people who've been in companies for many years that have sort of this underground influence that can tank your mission. And that happened multiple times for me when I was at Autodesk.
So how do you deal with that? I mean, clearly you were successful. How do you deal with that?
Well, I think I didn't deal with it that well because this was sort of new to me. And because I came in with this, like, you got to be resilient. You got to show up. You got to be ready for the fight. Again, how I showed up, being a woman in business, feeling like it's been like I have to prove, I have to be aggressive. I realized that was not the winning move. And it wasn't only until I left my job at Autodesk, AKA got pushed out, AKA got fired, where I had this, what the fuck just happened to me moment.
Yes.
Right? It was like, wait a minute, I have done all of this. I have a huge successful resume. I made incredible impact that was measurable in the company for 2 years. And how did this happen? Now, I know how it happened. The CEO quit, retired, who was my executive sponsor, who brought me in to do this kind of change-making work. And then my boss quit right afterwards, and new leaders came in who were part of the company, who knew me, but they did not believe in what I was trying to accomplish. And while I was shown the door, the new CEO said to me, Maria, I respect you. You did a lot of great work here, but you didn't trust what did he say? You should not have trusted the people that you trusted, or something like that. It was sort of weird, like you bet your horse on the wrong people.
Wow.
Right? And so the people who are in power now are the people that I kind of just wrote off, that I figured they're blocking me, so I'm going to ignore them. So what's the big lesson here? The big lesson is you got to show up with humility. When you show up, especially if you're new, you don't run into a burning building thinking you're going to save people, because there's lots of people who've been in that company who've seen people like me come and go, and they're just waiting for you to fail, right? Instead, you have to pay attention with those people who are most resistant to the things that you are doing. And you have to find a way to find common ground and heroize them and bring them into the fold, not ignore them. And this whole experience, this bad experience, was why I wrote Changemakers. Because I had this moment, which was, all right, this person who's been successful her whole life suddenly got pushed out the door. And I loved my job and I was making great change happen. What did I do right? What did I do wrong? And I realized that this was like new skills that people like me need to learn. And then I went, because again, I'm a designer and researcher. I want to learn what other people have experienced. And then I spent 3 years interviewing over 40 people in design, in entrepreneurship, in, you know, restaurants, in social justice, like a whole bunch of industries. And I interviewed catalysts. You would define them as catalysts. I would define them as change makers.
Yeah.
To learn the lessons that they had learned being in organizations. And that became the basis of change makers. But the catalyst was me getting fired.
Right? And a common story.
And I can appreciate the catharsis of writing the book if I only had that operating manual 4 years ago.
And that was it. It was like, I want to put something out in the world so other change leaders or catalysts or change makers, they have something that comes from experience that so that they don't come in, you know, like empty-handed like I did. I wanted people, that was the goal of the book, was it really is for people, for catalysts to have sort of a running start in terms of what to anticipate.
We've heard it here. If you're listening, you already know Shannon and I's book, but Change Makers is for you too. So be sure that you're picking that up. And I am learning things. I'm loving it.
Yeah.
So if we could use a time machine, Maria, and we could go back to before, what type of support or resources would you have dreamed that might have supported the transformation from one executive team to the next?
Yeah. This is where I believe in good mentors. And, you know, even though I do feel like I was sort of like one of the few women who were kind of charting a path in technology early on, I always had mentors that I could look up to who can give me guidance. That's the first really important resource, is to have people who have lived experience, wise elders, if you will, who can that can be can kind of like be a checkbox for you, somebody you can run things by you. And so I really did have some great mentors. Christopher Ireland, who's my co-author, is one of my top mentors. And she was a CEO of a company called Cheskin Research. I don't know if you've heard of it. You must have, because I
know Cheskin well.
Because they were a big, Microsoft was one of their biggest clients.
Yeah. And
Christopher was the CEO of that company, woman CEO, and 10 years, she's about 10 years older than me. And I could always lean on her for experience. And so that was super helpful. And as a matter of fact, she was the one who talked me into doing Rise of the DEO, the book Rise of the DEO, because she had saw me give a TED talk about this idea of a DEO, a creative business leader who possesses certain skills and qualities that when applied can be incredible leaders. So DEO is a creative business leader who sees all business problems as design problems solvable through creativity and metrics. And the DEO is a change agent, risk taker, uses intuition, systems thinking, people-centered, get it done. Sound familiar? Designers, right?
Yep.
And so I'm always comparing these design qualities that when you unlock them and apply them to leadership, not necessarily just attaching them to design the industry, but applying these mindsets and qualities to being a good leader, you're gonna stand above the rest, right? And so Christopher talked me into doing this book. And then that kicked off our, 10-year plus collaboration. And when I wanted to do Change Makers, I talked her into doing this book
I love it.
Still as a writer. She's an amazing writer.
I didn't know that. That's good news. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she's been a mentor, and I would say that's the most important resource.
Yeah.
Have good people around you that are smarter than you in certain domains. Also, as a business leader running Hot Studio, like I got a BFA in design, and I surrounded myself in like my sort of co-creator, co-conspirator was Rajan Dev, and he got an MBA, much like Christopher. She's got an MBA, but they both get design. So I'm a design leader who gets business, and I partner with people who are business leaders who get design. So we get this great cocktail of expertise. And then I had like somebody who's a specialist in finance and legal and banking and M&A. And this became like a nucleus of mentors that gave me the tools to make really good decisions in life.
It's like a personal board of directors that you built.
Absolutely.
It's amazing.
That's what I was thinking. Totally. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so funny because I often, when I coach people, I ask them about their internal board of directors or
Right.
their external board of directors. Who are the people in your nucleus that are going to extend and complement the superpowers you innately have?
Yeah.
Because none of this can be done without others.
100%.
Right.
There's another tie. I think that Shannon and I mentioned earlier, we run a Catalyst Leadership Trust, an executive group. And so I'm curious your thoughts. So you mentioned mentors, and to me, mentors typically, as you're talking about Christopher, is kind of that someone who's older and wiser. What is your experience or thoughts in having a peer group, in particular, if you had it at the time at Autodesk or Facebook, of those Catalyst peers to be the early folks that you're sensing with and co-creating with?
I had those too. So that was really critical when I was running Hot Studio as a CEO.
Okay.
So, and it is really funny because, we all start off like as collaborators / competitors. Sometimes our collaborators become competitors, and like Janice Fraser, you mentioned her. She's an incredible woman, and she was a collaborator at one point and a competitor at one point, right? And I remember growing up, we were really all part of that early pioneering period of the internet age, when we were all trying to make sense of what this new medium was and what it can do for humanity. And many of us had our own companies, and Janice had Adaptive Path, and I had Hot Studio, and Kevin Farnham had Method, and Simon Smith had Phoenix Pop. And so there was these groups of companies and Nathan Shedroff had Vivid, and we all were competing for the same kind of work. But I remember when the .com crash hit, and some of us survived and some of us did not. I was one of the lucky ones that survived. We would all meet at bars and drink and cry in our drinks together. And even though we were all competing, because it was like we were fighting over peas, it was like a famine. It's like, there's a job available, much like how designers are feeling today. Oh my God, there's a design gig, there's a RFP available. We're gonna like fight to the death to win this. But we also held each other up and shared misery and lessons learned. So there was this beautiful co-opetition amongst our peer group. And we're still friends today. And I think it's because you can be competitive, but not be evil.
Right.
You can be competitive, but you still can be compassionate and wish that wish the best for your competitors.
Yeah.
And, so that, I think, really, that kind of spirit.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I grew up in New York. I don't know if that would exist in New York back in those days, because, New Yorkers are like, you're going to die. That's great for me. I don't know. But
compassion.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I do have that New York edge, but I live in California, and it was all about like, I want to win, but I don't want to kill you.
Right.
And that was a beautiful, beautiful thing.
I'm drawn to some of the intersection between how you're talking about the group of mentors and the competitive peers. We love in our Catalyst group, it's not, a group of designers or all HR folks. And so they're, Catalyst, we jump. We move from being the head of a design agency that you've started to being the VP of design to being an executive coach, right? Like we go where the challenges that we're excited about are there for us. And so we're often not identified with a role forever. And so
I get that.
yeah, so we have folks that come from all kinds of disciplines, which I think sometimes for people is like, well, what is this? That's kind of a new thing. And we love that. We love that diversity of backgrounds and thoughts, the way you were talking about, from Christopher to, someone else that's kind of helping you see things in different ways, but then also that kindredness.
Yeah. And like for me, I started out as a fine artist doing paintings, dog portrait paintings, right? And jackets. I painted those, right? And then I became a CEO of one of the most successful, experienced design companies. My job was more business leader than design leader at that point, right? And then I worked in Facebook, and then I worked at Autodesk as an executive, and then I got fired and I became a coach and now a spiritual advisor, right? So I often coach people to not think of career ladders, but think of them as trampolines.
Oh, I love it.
And because if you think of the ladder, it's linear.
Yep.
If you think of a trampoline, you're thinking about what is driving you, where is your innate skills? And does it have to be applied to the industry that you have experience in? And so when I got fired at Autodesk, I didn't need the money because I've sold my company in Facebook. So it's not about the money, but this is often true with people I coach anyway. It's not about the money. They're afraid of money, but at the end of the day, it's more about being fear of forgotten, or suddenly like taking a pause and suddenly you're no longer going to be relevant in the industry. There's a lot more fear there than it is about reason and logic. And so what I get people to think about through some, homework assignments and things like that is to, where's the joy? What are the things in life that bring you energy? And let's unpack it. Let's not necessarily tie it to, well, I, know how to, I can do an OKR like nobody's business, or I can set strategy, or I can wireframe my ass off. Like, okay, those are good skills and those are important, put them down. But what are the things that you feel like are calling to you, that really give you energy that you can do all day long? And so when I was like going on these, like, oh my God, I get another VP job, and I was talking to Google and Twitter and all the big ones, right? I went to a party. This is also what happens when you're saying like some things. I was like, pay attention to the little things that the universe gives you. I was at a party, and one of my mentors, Clement Mock, he was at a party. And I'm like telling him, yeah, I'm, interviewing for VP of X and Y. And he's like, he looked at me, and Clement is not a man of many words. So you wouldn't expect any kind of wisdom coming from Clement. He just was like, why are you doing this, Maria? He just asked the question, why are you doing this? You have money. You sold your company. Why are you still doing this? And it was just like, okay, sign from the universe, lightning bolt moment. And it was like, why? Why is the question?
Such a good question.
And
such a good question.
And I then went home and I went, I'm going to stop. I'm going to call the recruiters off. I'm going to say, give me some time. Then I went to Mexico and read Brene Brown books. And then I had this inspiration. When I think about the arc of my long career, and at this point I'm 55 years old, so 30 years already in the business, it wasn't about shipping great products, although I still love that. When I look at the arc of my career, what gave me the most joy is to get people to believe in something bigger than themselves and bring out the best in them. And that was the through line.
Yes.
So
Amen.
when I coach people, I help them find the through line.
Yeah.
What's the through line in your life that you can look from one career job to the other, that connective tissue that got you up in the morning?
It's such a great question for our listeners, right? It's like that's a great homework exercise out of this conversation today. And it goes back to the why. Like, what's the through line that you can pull that gives
Yes.
you that purpose and joy, that money aside? I always said there was a big epiphany when I was younger, because I had a friend, this was like super early days too, who was into computers, and I had wanted to get into computers. I was like, that guy's so lucky because he gets paid to do what he would sit at home and do anyway, right? And my
Right.
husband came in today after the CLT, and I was actually sharing with him the email that I got from Janice, and I'm like beaming, and he's like,
Yeah.
he's an entrepreneur too. And he was,
Yeah.
you would seriously do your job if you didn't get paid for it. And I'm like, yeah, I love helping people. And this is the through line, is like, how do we
Right.
help Catalyst? All right. In the interest of time, I'm going to move us on to our fun final question.
Okay.
Who is your favorite Catalyst, past or present, and why?
Yeah. I went big.
Awesome.
You go big or you go home. So there's really two. One of them is Michelle Obama. And
Nice.
you know, so you know, one of the things, one coaching thing that I do for my coach is to try to have them, one of my coaching questions is, who are the people, whether they're real or fictitious, whether you've met them or not, that you deeply admire and why? Always ask that question, right? And for me, the reason why Michelle Obama does it is, I look at a woman, again, faced with incredible adversity. She is authentic and human, knows where she came from, that's still always part of her fabric. Was, she grew up in, was it South Side Chicago, right? Um, and that part of her, she's always carried her folk. She always knows who she is. And she's dealt with racism and sexism, and she's a woman who had a career, and she's made choices, and then she figured out what her role would be as a first lady. And there's just this confidence that she exudes, and warmth. So I do a lot of public speaking, and whenever, one of the reasons why I don't get nervous on stage is, before I get on stage, I have a secret conversation with Michelle Obama. She gives me a pep talk.
That's amazing.
She gives me a pep talk, like, you got, because you ever seen Michelle Obama? You got this. You got this. You know who you are. You know this stuff. You just be you. You carry your own power. Like, I get the whole like pep talk. And so I carry that energy on the stage, and that helps me. And oftentimes I coach people in leadership positions. If they're going into a meeting, a really hard meeting that might be either toxic or adverse, who's that spiritual person or thing that could give you advice before you go into that meeting? That, that kind of helps you reset who you are and what your intention is, how you want to be in that meeting.
Yes, how you want to show up. And like,
How
when
you want to show up.
it's like this grounding energy when I hear you. I mean, there's a fire behind it, but there's like this power and this grounding behind the Michelle. So who's the other one?
Dalai Lama.
Nice.
Right.
Tell us more.
I know, Dalai Lama, because like, here's a guy who got, pushed out of Tibet with all the other, Tibetan monks, right? And they had to climb mountains and, snow and rocks and adversity, and had nothing to settle back into India. And here, I don't know how old the Dalai Lama is now, but this is a man, I mean, he's the closest you can get to Buddha, that despite all of the adversity, he remains positive and optimistic. He's spiritual, but he's also a person.
Totally. And he's his laughter, like the amount of laughter and joy. We were talking about joy,
Joy.
like find your joy. He's like kind of joy embodied after all that he's been through. Yeah.
And he remains optimistic and joyful.
That's a great call to action. Let's end it there because that was amazing, Maria. That was so fun. And yeah, clearly we would love to talk with you for hours, but I just wanted to say, deep gratitude for sharing your wisdom with our listeners.
It's been a lot of fun.
And to our listeners, thanks so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about how to accelerate positive change, go to our website at catalystconstellations.com.
Be sure to check out our book, Move Fast, Break Shit, Burnout. If you have other catalysts in your life, hit the share button, send a link their way.